The Life of Buddha, Episode 3, The Plowing Ceremony. Welcome back to the video series about the life of Buddha. In the previous episode, we heard the story of the Buddha's birth, from the time Queen Mahamaya of the Kapilavatthu kingdom became pregnant until the Bodhisattva was born. Queen Mahamaya, wife of King Suddhodana, had been childless for many years. One day she had a wonderful dream. The four great kings took her to a high mountain and bathed her with water from a sacred pond. Then a white elephant with 6 tusks came from the golden mountain and entered her right side. This dream was interpreted by the Brahmins as an auspicious sign, foretelling the birth of a great man. On the full moon day of Vesakha, Queen Mahamaya, on her way home to give birth, came to the Lumbini forest. There, under a blossoming sala tree, she gave birth to Prince Siddhārtha in a gentle and miraculous way. As soon as he was born, heavenly music played, heavenly flowers fell, the earth and sky shook, and 2 golden dragons from the blue clouds sprayed water to bathe him. King Suddhodana then invited the Brahmins to predict his fortune. They agreed that the prince would have 2 paths. If he remained in the palace, he would become a universal monarch, or if he left home, he would become a Samyak Sambuddha. In particular, the young Brahmin Kondanya asserted that the prince would choose the path of renunciation and become a Buddha. Asita, a holy man, also came to visit the prince. When he saw him, he was both happy and sad. He was happy for humanity that the prince would become enlightened, but sad that he himself would not live to see the day when the prince would become a Buddha and preach. Finally, King Suddhodana named the prince Siddhārtha and made him the crown prince of the kingdom of Kapilavatthu. The Life of Buddha, Episode 3, The Plowing Ceremony. The Sakyas were a ruling family of an ancient, small kingdom. Although not as powerful and wealthy as neighboring countries such as Kosala and Gada, the people's lifestyle was relatively beautiful and stable. Kapilavatthu was a political, cultural, commercial, and economic capital, developing all industries, but agriculture was still the lifeblood of society. Far to the north are snow-capped mountains, and to the south are dense forests with many rare forest products. This is a temperate zone with a moderate climate. The Rohini River, before flowing into the sea, leaves behind vast fields rich in alluvium and minerals. This plain is the rice granary that feeds everyone, so agriculture is encouraged by many dynasties. King Suddhodana, since ascending the throne to succeed his father, King Sihahanu, had a far-sighted vision. It was King Sihahanu who opened his son's knowledge, linked up with the Koliya kingdom, creating a situation of lips not open, teeth not cold, to confront the large Kosala empire next door. This king married the other king's sister, forming a close relationship to support each other. After calming the political situation, the king turned to economic development. The country would be strong if the people were rich. The most effective agricultural promotion policy was to reduce agricultural taxes, provide fertilizers and seeds, and farmers must have land. That was still not enough. Every year, the great and honorable king also organized a downfield ceremony for the king and his officials to go down to the fields to plow with the people. It was this delicate and clever action that made the people very grateful and loved the king. The planting ceremonies were originally meant to encourage agriculture, but gradually they became a joyful holiday for the whole society. Now it has become a traditional custom. Every year, when spring begins to bring warm sunshine, chasing away the long cold of winter, the whole population is excited and eager to prepare for the farming season. 3 days before, the king lets the people have fun. This is an opportunity for everyone, young and old, noble and humble, rich and poor, to dress neatly, look nice, and go to public entertainment venues organized by the royal court. On this occasion, King Suddhodana, Queen Mahapajati Gautami led Prince Siddhārtha and a few of his entourage on a 4-horse carriage to tour around. The entire capital was decorated extremely beautifully, the people were dressed beautifully, and the colors were as brilliant as butterflies in spring. The king lifted the curtain to show the prince, who was then 7 years old, the scene and said, "You see, this splendid capital will be yours in the future. The happy, prosperous, well-dressed, and beautiful people will be your loyal subjects." Prince Siddhārtha was delighted, clapped his hands, and turned to hug Queen Mahapajapati Gautami. "Mom! Mom! Let me go out and play with them." Lady Gautami smiled and said affectionately, "We still have to go see many places, my child. I'm afraid we don't have enough time." The four-horse carriage slowly drove out of the suburbs. The roads were clean and tidy, and the houses emitted smoke from the sky. The king told the carriage driver to stop and led the prince up a small hill, pointing into the distance. "You see, from those deep green mountain ranges to the plains stretching far away to the horizon is the lush and beautiful country left by the late emperor. Tomorrow, it will all be yours." Sitting down low to be at the prince's level, the king gently patted his son's shoulder and explained, "The green forests at the foot of those mountains give us many kinds of precious wood to build palaces, houses, tables, chairs, utensils, and spices. It also generously gives us other valuable forest products, such as ivory, velvet, tiger bone glue, agarwood, cinnamon. This plain is a great warehouse of rice and sticky rice, and in this land there is so much gold, jade, pearls, and other valuable metals. Later on, you will be able to live a life of glory and wealth in a powerful and beautiful country." On the morning of the third day, the king and his ministers, with their horses and chariots in full dress, came out to the prime field to hold the ceremony. The escorting troops saluted. A group of ceremonial and festive soldiers set up the altar and performed ceremonial music. A group of Brahmins dressed in luxurious clothes circled the area, chanting prayers to the gods to protect the country and the people. King Suddhodana knelt down and prayed for the dynasty to last long and for the people to have enough food and warm clothes. In the distance, people crowded together, standing densely, throwing flowers, sprinkling water. The ceremony of plowing the fields began. Drums, gongs, cymbals, gongs, and gongs bustled with each step as the king slowly walked down to the fields. The official in charge of agriculture was ready, bowing and handing the king a plow. The biggest, most docile, and tame buffalo was prepared. Then, with a few gentle whip strokes from the king, the buffalo leisurely pulled the plow, cutting each furrow of soft, sweet soil. After plowing 3 symbolic lines, the successive ministers each plowed 9 more lines. Thus, the people of the neighboring fields and the people of the whole country, following the king's example, began the farming season. Meanwhile, scattered everywhere, in empty lots, under the shade of ancient trees, people organized entertainment such as singing, acting, quizzing, dice, wrestling. It was truly a scene of peace and prosperity. Prince Siddhārtha was also allowed by the king and queen to go out with the maids on a golden palanquin with curtains and blinds. When they arrived, they carried the prince's palanquin to the shade of a rose apple tree next to the field, then invited each other to go out here and there. Prince Siddhārtha rarely had the chance to be alone and free like that. He happily stepped down from the palanquin, took off his royal shoes, and put his feet on the soft, cool grass. The gentle sunlight glistened on the golden silk, the wind blew gently, rustling and cheerfully through the branches and leaves. The prince sat down, his mind at peace, his eyes innocent and pure, looking near and then looking far. The newly plowed furrows were exposed to the sunlight, revealing the writhing, broken bodies of worms. A flock of small birds swooped down from the sky, pecking each other loudly, then picked up the bloody bodies of worms and flew away. Prince Siddhārtha was deeply moved. A vague impact seemed to knock on his childhood consciousness. Associations with images that came from nowhere appeared one after another. Then, in his young mind, which contained the potential for extraordinary intelligence, a thought emerged about the cruel struggle for survival of all species. Those little birds, after carrying away the worms, were they at peace? A weasel lurking somewhere will jump out, pounce, bite, and devour. Will that weasel be at peace? A leopard, a tiger, will devour their bodies. Then a skillful hunter will shoot down a tiger, a leopard with poisoned arrows, also for his own survival. That pair of oxen, that pair of buffaloes will bend their backs, pulling the plow under the scorching sun, under the whip, just to get a handful of grass, a handful of straw. Those farmers, exhausted, sweating profusely, may just get a bowl of porridge, a bowl of rice. This animal eats that animal to maintain its life, and even its life is threatened by being torn apart by larger animals. And the larger animal is only a target for the bows that are ready to be drawn. Oh, the survival of the fittest is something so cruel and inhuman. Is it true that all species and all things will always kill and slaughter each other like this? For the prince, all things with their peaceful scenery were gone. A gray cloud had drifted across the blue sky. The prince sat cross-legged in the lotus position, closed his eyes, and was deep in thought, silent. His heart was agitated. His skin trembled slightly. After a while, the bustling sounds around him faded into a vague, distant realm. The prince let his mind relax, innocent like a child, listening to his breathing. The peaceful air gradually spread out, and the outside world disappeared. The prince achieved joy and peace of mind, and then easily entered the first meditation. The palace maid, whose duty it was to look after the prince, secretly ran off to watch the fun. After a long while, she suddenly remembered and ran back to the palanquin. Strangely enough, although the sun had set, the shadow of the giant jujube tree still stood still, casting a cool shade over the prince like a great canopy. Seeing the prince sitting with his eyes closed, calm and dignified like a young Taoist, the palace maid hurriedly went to report the matter to King Suddhodana. The king hurriedly arrived, saw the prince's calm and composed expression, sitting in meditation as steady as a mountain, and felt a sense of respect. He knelt down, clasped his hands in greeting, and said, "Oh, my dear son, this is the second time I have bowed to you." The other day, King Suddhodana spoke to Queen Mahapajati Gautami. "Do you see? I feel very worried because young Siddhārtha is not like other children. He is always quiet and does not talk much. In the middle of fun, he never laughs or talks too loudly. He likes to sit alone. It is difficult for anyone to know what is going on in that small, pretty mind." Queen Gautami suggested. Siddhārtha was 8 years old, but the king still did not let him meet and play with the children of the royal family. He was lonely and sad, of course. King Suddhodana shook his head. "I think differently. Among children of the same age, he is like a phoenix. His character is so noble and lofty. He will be worthy of becoming a holy wheel-turning king in the future, and that was also the dream of the previous emperors of the powerful Sakya lineage." Queen Gautami spoke in a gentle voice. "Siddhārtha was at the age of learning to read." "That's right," the king nodded. "I'm thinking of a separate, independent education. It must be a special education to transform personality, to sublimate qualities. Education can also change the mind, change the character, change the destiny of a person. What about a few quiet, taciturn personalities?" Obviously, when he said that, the king was haunted by the prophecy of the ascetic Asita and the Brahmin Kondanya. The education that the king thought was how to make the prince know how to respect the throne, know how to love the country, so that he would give up the wild idea of leaving home to seek the path. Mrs. Gautami thought differently. The prince was still young, so he had to live like a child. He had to go out and play with other children. Let him live an innocent life of playing, running, singing, and laughing. By forcing himself into a life without interacting with anyone, Siddhārtha would further cultivate his taciturn personality. Withdrawing himself, he would lose the innocence of his childhood and push Siddhārtha further away from the throne. But she did not dare to say it. The king's intention was supreme. In the morning, during the court session, King Suddhodana said to his ministers, "Now Siddhārtha is 8 years old. I want to choose a tutor to take care of the prince's education, so please recommend me a wise and talented scholar." After a while of discussion, all the mandarins unanimously concluded, "Your Majesty." In the kingdom, only the Brahmin Svamita is worthy of this important responsibility. He is highly talented and learned, well-versed in literature and martial arts, has memorized the scriptures, is also a linguist, a measurer, an astronomer, a geographer, a physician. What is more valuable is that he is morally strict, lives a life free from worldly influences, is humble, kind, and his reputation and good name spread like a gentle mandala flower in all directions. King Suddhodana nodded with satisfaction. "All right, it is truly precious. My prince must have such an outstanding teacher. Both virtue and talent must cover the world like that." An old minister suddenly stood up and said, "Brahmin Svamita is the scholar of scholars, but to educate the noble prince who will later become a wise king, there must be a council of professors. Then the king can rest assured." "That's right," Lord Suddhodana praised. "You are very thoughtful, the knowledge of a good servant. Well, you should do it." Early one morning, a Brahmin, tall and elegant, with long hair like clouds, dressed simply and neatly, appeared before the royal palace. King Suddhodana had his servants welcome him into the court, clearly stating the purpose of his studies and other serious requirements. The Brahmin listened respectfully, then bowed his head modestly. "I will do my best, Your Majesty. As for the salary, you do not need to worry. I am quite thoughtful and generous about that, as long as the prince becomes outstanding in all fields." "I dare not." At that moment, Prince Amitadana introduced 8 other Brahmins to the king and told him that they were his assistants, each learned and skilled in different subjects. Looking at the Brahmin teachers, each of them had a flat, broad forehead, bright, spirited eyes, elegant demeanor and gestures, a steady and calm gaze, and demonstrated profound learning. The king was extremely pleased. He ordered a light feast to be prepared immediately to entertain the council of teachers, then entrusted Prince Siddhārtha to the teacher's care. The king called his maid to ask Lady Gautami to bring the prince to meet the teachers. Svamita and the 8 Brahmins had heard rumors about this prince in recent years, and they had very complete information about the appearance of an extraordinary personality, but had not yet met him. Now they were free to admire the face of the little prince. This was the first time in their lives that they saw a person, like something perfect, extremely good, and extremely beautiful that nature had painstakingly created. It seemed that all the noble essence, all the supreme qualities of the universe had been distilled to weave into one human being. Svamita saw this clearly, and the 8 Brahmins saw it too. So after the introduction, they sat down together to draft an educational program not for smart, clever children, but only for gifted, naturally gifted children. King Suddhodana, the princes such as Duryodhana, Sakadana, Sakodana, Amitodana, all of whom were his brothers, after seeing the educational program presented by the Brahmins, they exclaimed in surprise and said, "No child in the world can follow such a heavy program." Svamita respectfully said, "Your Majesty, please rest assured, we have had the honor of seeing the Crown Prince's appearance. He is truly an outstanding personality, one that only appears once in a million years. This program was drafted after we discussed, debated, and researched very carefully. On the first opening day, we would like to invite the king, the princes, and the elders to witness the opening day of the class." The king was very excited to choose an auspicious day and month for the prince to attend the enlightenment class. That morning, the prince sat upright in his robes and hat. In front of him was a rosewood board inlaid with precious jade and covered with fine white sand. The prince held a small brush in his hand, looking up innocently and calmly at everyone around him. Svamita informed the king that the lesson was about to begin. He looked at the prince as if to gauge his intelligence, then became silent and thoughtful. The king and everyone else waited anxiously. Suddenly, Svamita raised his voice and chanted loudly, "Enter into meditation and contemplate the sun. The radiant light shines in all directions. Sincerely pray for grace from above. Open your mind, listen to the sutra, and understand clearly." Then he suddenly said, "Your Highness, please read those 4 verses again and see how they are." The king and everyone looked at the prince with concern. The prince stood up, folded his hands respectfully, and said, "Yes, Master Adoli." Then the prince recited those 4 verses fluently and easily. Suddenly everyone clapped their hands, cheered, and praised joyfully. Svamita, with a solemn manner, reached out and took the brush to write those 4 verses very quickly and beautifully on the white sandboard, then bowed his head slightly. "Your Highness, please review it carefully, then I will erase it. And those 4 verses, I hope that Your Highness will be able to rewrite them." "Yes, Master Adoli. Please rest assured, your disciple will obey and try to do so." "Done." The prince smiled. The brush suddenly flew and sparkled on the erased sandboard. The handwriting was cheerful, playful, jumping very flexibly, and was done in a flash. The king and everyone were stunned by the prince's extraordinary memory. Only Svamita did not seem surprised at all. He said, "Your Majesty, that is what I foresaw when I saw the prince's appearance." "Then please approve the curriculum." Suddhodana smiled. "I agree. Then please take care of your duties and do not let me down." Svamita and the 8 Brahmins stood up and bowed their heads. The king, the princes, and the elders left the hall with unprecedented joy. that the heroic Sakya country had indeed given birth to a wise king. In the not-too-distant future, it was hoped that Kapilavatthu would escape the fate of a vassal state, having been subject to the powerful Kosala Empire next door for generations. Prince Siddhārtha thus began a rigorous program of study. The Brahmin Svamita divided the subjects among 8 Brahmin teachers, while he himself was in charge of the overall program, supervising, guiding, and serving the prince in his daily activities. Every day, when the royal drum signaled the end of the 3rd watch, the prince was awakened by Svamita, who stood politely by the door and rang the bell. The first thing Svamita did was instruct him on the morning hygiene ritual in the manner of a little emperor. Svamita instructed him on how to sit, brush his teeth and tongue, and rinse his mouth with soma-scented water. 2 maids were ordered by Gautama to carry a basin of warm, scented water to bathe the prince, clean his body, and put medicine in his eyes. The prince was given new clothes, shoes, and a new hat, and was adorned with precious gems and fresh flowers. The Brahmin Svamita invited the prince to the meditation room to learn how to control his mind and breath, and to learn Hatha Yoga. At breakfast time, 2 other maids invited the prince to the dining room, which was decorated cheerfully and coolly. The finest foods were served on gold and silver plates, with fragrant aromas and very attractive colors. Svamita was about to instruct the prince on how to sit and eat like a king, when the prince slowly sat down on the carpet, crossed his legs in the lotus position, and clasped his hands together. Then, with slow, leisurely gestures, the prince ate bit by bit, eating carefully, chewing and swallowing very carefully. Svamita was so impressed that he exclaimed, "Your Highness's way of sitting and eating is more flexible and serious than the scriptures left behind from thousands of years ago." Queen Gautami smiled proudly. "Everything is innate. The prince seems to not need anyone to teach him anything, from sleeping, lying down, sitting, walking, standing." Svamita said, "That's right, madam. The prince has already understood very well the rituals he was instructed in this morning and practiced them very well. So, from now on, I only ask your madam to have the maid ring the bell to remind him of the time. On time, the Brahmins will meet the prince in the classroom." Svamita respectfully saluted Lady Gautami and the prince and withdrew. As dawn broke over the horizon, the prince entered the classroom, following a very heavy curriculum. At first, the prince was taught literature, language, grammar, and syntax. Interspersed among them were subjects of art, poetry, painting, how to play instruments, singing, listening. But seeing the prince's easy learning, Svamita expanded a program to explore the prince's innate genius by giving him additional, general lessons in the subjects of history, Vedic philosophy, astronomy, geography, medicine, mathematics, measurement, martial arts. Seeing how the teacher taught, the prince learned that much, very comfortably, not forgetting anything, not asking anything. Strangely, the Brahmin Svamita asked, "Does your Highness find it difficult?" "No, Sir Adole." "Will your Highness study again tonight?" "No, Sir Adole." Frowning in confusion, Svamita continued to ask, "So your Highness learned it right away?" "Yes, that's right." Svamita looked at the little student who always answered with folded hands, bowed his head, and spoke very politely, but he didn't understand why. Suddenly the prince asked, "Why do the Adole teachers teach such a small program and not teach more?" "What subject do you mean, your Highness?" "Yes, sir, about all subjects. It seems that the teachers still want to hide their talents and do not want to teach all of them to their disciples. Can you give me an example?" "Yes, sir," the prince nodded and continued. In the very first verse that Master Adole read, Master Adole only read one verse, while there are countless other famous verses in ancient books, ancient scriptures. Why don't you read them all to your disciples? Having said that, before Svamita's horrified eyes, the prince took a brush and wrote on the sandboard from one verse to another. He wrote and erased and wrote again, endlessly before Svamita's eyes, which were widening more and more. The first 5 or 7 verses, Svamita still knew, still remembered. But as time went on, Svamita became more and more confused and blind. Svamita stood still, rooted to the spot. Prince Siddhārtha continued innocently, "Even the Adole teachers hide their talent when it comes to writing. There are many other strange types of writing. Why don't the teachers teach them?" Having said that, the prince reached his hand up to the sandboard. Then, one by one, the letters Nagari, Daksina, Ni, Mangola, Parusa, Yava, Tirthi, Uka, Tarat, Sikayani, Mana, Madhyachara appeared one by one. Unable to stop, the prince continued to write other letters such as symbols, letters of the ancients still preserved in stone caves, letters of the natives of coastal and mountainous areas, letters of those who worshipped the fire god, the snake god, the sun god, letters of astrologers in ancient castles in the desert. As if in a state of excitement, continuing the profound knowledge from many lifetimes, the prince wrote on the sandboard all the ancient languages, reciting the secret verses of many true masters throughout the entire continent of Jambudvipa. Svamita knelt down, clasped his hands respectfully, and exclaimed, "I bow to the prince. You are the holy patriarch of language and literature. Even if I study for my whole life, I still will not be able to finish. So how dare I teach you about this subject?" Prince Siddhārtha helped the old teacher stand up. "But I don't know the current languages of countries, tribes, and natives. Please, Master Adole, don't humble yourself like that. I still have a lot to learn." Experienced in language and literature, Svamita immediately summoned the council of professors and said, "During the time you were in charge of your subjects, did anyone discover anything strange about the prince's learning?" All answered in unison, "Yes, sir." Then a Brahmin stood up and said, "I am in charge of mathematics and measurement. I have just discovered that, in this subject, the crown prince is truly a saint." Excited, Svamita raised his eyes and asked, "Please give specific details for the council to review." "First, I taught the prince how to count from 1, 2, 3. I counted first, the prince counted later. I counted to 10,000, the prince recited it fluently. I stopped there and told him that he had to recite it over and over again to memorize it and not rely on his extraordinary memory. The prince obeyed very politely. In the following hours, I reviewed my notes and continued to learn, also how to count up to 100,000, 1 lakh. The other day, the prince suddenly said, "Why doesn't Master Adola teach how to count to 1 koti, 1 million, 10 koti, 100 koti, 1,000 koti, 100,000 koti, 1,000,000 koti, 1,000,000,000 koti?" Surprised, I asked, "So how much can the prince count?" The prince said, "I will count, but if there is anything wrong, please instruct me, Master Adoli." The Brahmin professor of mathematics and measurement stopped speaking. Everyone turned their eyes, attentively. He continued slowly, "It is truly unimaginable." The prince counted. The prince himself counted to the number of billions. The prince counted to the number used to calculate the molecules of the earth, counted to the number used to calculate the stars, counted to the number used to calculate the drops of water in the ocean, counted to the number used to calculate the types of rings, counted to the number used to calculate the sand grains of the Ganga River, counted to the number of 10 million sand grains of the Ganga River as a unit to calculate the number of Asamkhya, using the number of Asamkhya as a unit to calculate the drops of rain in the world that fall continuously day and night for 10,000 years. Finally, he counted to the number of a great eon, Mahakapa, counted to the number of gods used to calculate the past, the future. The council of professors sat in dead silence. A lizard clicked its tongue and sighed somewhere. Everyone froze. The professor continued, "Not yet. Regarding measurements, the prince could come up with strange calculations like this. 10 paraminutes equal 1 parasakama. 10 parasakama equals 1 sheet of rasaran. 7 sheets of rasaran equals 1 mote of dust floating in the sunlight. 7 motes equal 1 hair of a mouse's mustache. 10 hairs of a mouse's mustache equal 1 likhya. 10 likhya equals 1 dukkha. 10 dukkha equals 1 barley nut. 7 barley nuts equal 1 sesame seed. 10 sesame seeds equal 1 finger joint. 9 finger joints equal 1 handspan. 2 handspans equal 1 wooden foot. 5 wooden feet equal the length of a spear. 10 spear lengths equal 1 breath. 40 breaths equal 1 gao. 40 gaos equal 1 yojana. In addition, the prince also calculated the total number of dust particles in a square duton. The professor finished speaking and sat down quietly. Then after that, the other Brahmin teachers also stood up and presented the prince's innate knowledge of the subjects of national history, history of Jambudvipa, pre-Vedic and Vedic philosophical thoughts, astronomy, geography, medicine, martial arts, military strategy, painting, poetry, natural science. There were subjects that the prince had a very deep understanding of. There were subjects that the prince learned one subject and knew 10. Brahmin Svamita also presented to the entire council about the prince's literary and linguistic abilities. At this point, they all agreed, only those subjects that are currently available in the world, are modern, or inherit the past with new discoveries, the prince may not know yet. Then, they discussed a different curriculum, both reviewing past knowledge and promptly supplementing modern knowledge. The Council of Atulas, once again, came to see King Suddhodana, presented the story to him and said, "The prince is a learned prodigy. There is no subject in which the prince does not show superiority and wisdom. He is the master of masters. I am afraid that we are not worthy to be his students anymore. His knowledge is like that, but his virtue and humility make us respect and admire him even more. The prince is the embodiment of what is noble and best in this world." King Suddhodana already knew that the prince was an extraordinary person, but he did not expect that the prince was even more than that so-called extraordinary person. He is truly an unprecedented Superman in this world. The prince must be the true destiny of a holy king who turns the wheel, which the king has only heard about through history books and legends. So according to the words of these learned Brahmins, the prince is only lacking in modern knowledge. The prince was only well-versed in the past, but not well-versed in the present. The program that the Brahmins had just submitted met that requirement. Thinking thus, Suddhodana consoled and reassured, "You have thought very carefully and have worked with all your might. I will reward you greatly. The crown prince's knowledge is still lacking. I hope you will not put yourself down anymore, but continue working according to the plan you have outlined. I have complete confidence in your seriousness and brilliance." So from the age of 8 to 15, the prince focused on cultivating a path of learning that no one from ancient times to the present had been able to learn. Summarizing the world's knowledge of all subjects from ancient times to the present, without a single subject that is not the master of mankind. The forest in the royal garden has changed its leaves for several seasons. The prince has grown like a bamboo shoot, like a flower, becoming more plump and beautiful. Lady Gautama loved him dearly, pampering him more than jade or ivory. Seeing the prince from early morning, day after day, diligently and regularly entering the meditation room, entering the study room, her heart was filled with boundless compassion. Outside, butterflies were flying, birds were singing, flowers were blooming. On the other side of the city wall, from time to time, the sound of children laughing and playing could be heard. Lady Gautama thought of the prince and sighed again. The other day, unable to contain herself, she said to King Suddhodana, "Perhaps your majesty should let the child study less and let him play a little sometimes. He is just a child." Seeing that the prince had devoted himself to his studies for so many years, there had never been a time when he needed to be reminded. Moreover, the prince's character and qualities were becoming more and more evident, like a flawless Mani jewel, not easily tainted by anyone else's temperament. So the king smiled and agreed. "Yes, that's fine. There are many sons of princes and ministers of the same age as him." So from that day on, the sons of princes and ministers were allowed to play with the crown prince. Among them were 3 children who were the closest to the prince, namely Ananda, Mahanama, and Kaudai. Ananda was the son of Prince Amitadana, born in the same year, month, day, and hour as the prince. He had a beautiful appearance and an extraordinary memory. During the bathing and naming ceremony, the Brahmins, who were well versed in physiognomy, praised him endlessly. They said that the prince had a superhuman mind. He could remember and memorize any subject with just a glance or a brief hearing. In addition, the prince had unmatched health. According to his physiognomy, he would be free from illness throughout his life, and his lifespan could exceed the limit of 100 years of human life. However, there was something very strange that the Brahmins did not understand. Ananda was not destined to be a king, not destined to marry, and did not enjoy great wealth and honor, but only achieved brilliant success in the position of an assistant. Mahanama was the son of Prince Sukhadana and also the jewel of the royal family. When he was born, the Brahmins whispered to Prince Suddhodana that Mahanama was destined to be king. It was this secret that made the prince harbor ambitions for the throne of Kapila Vattu in the future. Mahanama had a younger brother named Anuruddha, who was elegant, intelligent, and kind. He often followed his brother to join the prince in his fun. Kadudai was the son of an old and virtuous minister. He had a dignified and majestic appearance, was steady and loyal, and had a temperament that was sometimes tough and sometimes gentle. In the future, he could become an exemplary minister for the royal court. The youngest was Nanda, the son of Queen Gautami, the half-brother of the prince, also very handsome, very wealthy, but not destined to be king. Suddhodana was very worried about the prophecies, first the prince and then Nanda. If everyone became monks, who would be left with the country? Because he was afraid that the 4 messengers would come at some point to report, the king secretly ordered the old, decrepit, ugly people, those with diseases that looked sore, smelly, and disgusting, to gradually leave the capital, and settled them in remote, isolated places. Still not reassured, the king also had people monitor the people the prince came into contact with in the places where he often went to have fun. After a while, King Suddhodana felt reassured. The prince often went for a walk around the royal garden with Ananda, Mahanam, and Kadudai, always accompanied by Nanda, who was toddling along. And the children's games were all innocent and harmless. They were popular games of the time, making scarecrows, fighting with sticks, playing with chariots and miniature bows and arrows, competing with each other on a board divided into 8 or 10 squares, Chinese chess or ancient chess. When tired, they would lie down on the green grass and chat with each other. The prince took out the small trumpet he always carried with him and played an ancient melancholy tune. Kadudai and Mahanam discussed a few points about Vedic literature or philosophy, and then they asked the prince to elaborate. The prince's knowledge was so profound that Ananda listened with rapt attention. Nanda played with the garland around his neck, then secretly put it on the prince. The prince said to everyone, "Next time you shouldn't make flower garlands like that. Flowers left naturally on the tree and branches look fresher and more beautiful." Lady Gautami came out from behind the bushes with 2 maids carrying cakes and fruits in their hands. "Trees, grass, flowers, and leaves all have life, my friends," the prince continued. "Let's love them like we have loved the birds, fish, crickets, grasshoppers, butterflies, bees in this garden." Ananda smiled. "There is nothing wrong with what the prince said, right, guys?" "That's right," Mahanama nodded. "The garland on the prince's neck now looks pitifully ugly. It has lost its life." Lady Gautami added, "That comment is so true. Let's eat some cake and watch this strange thing." Having said this, she took the garland from the prince's neck and replaced it with a jade necklace. Everyone watched attentively. Suddenly Ananda spoke. "The jade necklace around the prince's neck, no matter how much I look at it, it still doesn't look beautiful. How strange." Lady Gautami continued to replace it with a necklace of rubies, a necklace of pearls, a necklace of diamonds. Ananda continued to criticize it as ugly and not beautiful. "No jewelry has ever enhanced the prince's beauty. That has surprised me for a long time." Mrs. Gautami said and continued to admire, "The prince's skin is so bright and clear, all the pearls and gems in the world must be overshadowed." The prince smiled. "Mom, everything looks beautiful when left natural, not just in my case. Besides, when I put on makeup, I feel so uncomfortable." Everyone burst out laughing when they saw the prince frown. Oh, even the prince's frown made so many people love him. The day before yesterday, the prince and the children went on a trip. After escaping the watchful eyes of the maids, they wandered into a vast horse farm. Stables followed by stables stretched as far as the eye could see. Hundreds of people were working in the stables and on the pastures. Oh, so many horses in so many different colors and shapes. They all climbed over the fence and sneaked into the nearest stable. A dirty-clothed child had just emerged from the grass. Seeing the noble people suddenly appear, he was frightened and knelt down. The crown prince stepped forward, gently held his hand, and said in a soft voice, "Don't be afraid. No one will do anything to you. We are friends." The child still did not dare to raise his head. The prince brushed the straw from his head with his hand, used a towel to wipe the dirt from his face, smoothed the child's messy hair, and then said kindly, "What is your name? How old are you? What do you do now? Where are you?" The child seemed to sense the prince's gentle, kind heart through his friendly gestures and warm voice, so he boldly raised his head to look up. His eyes suddenly lit up. It was true that before him appeared the children of heaven, so noble, so beautiful. "I am Siddhārtha, this is Mahanam, this is Kanadai, this is Ananda, and this is Nanda. We are all good friends. Come and play, my friend." Oh! Their voices and smiles, the child was mesmerized. Then he said that his name was Chana, 15 years old, the son of a Kshatriya general who had fallen out of favor with the royal court and was in charge of a horse stable. Since Chana's parents had died, he had no one to take care of him, so he had been wandering around the horse stable. The horse stable keepers, knowing Chana's background and having respected the general, let Chana live freely, doing whatever he wanted. Anyone could feed him his daily food. In addition, Chana had a special talent for handling horses and reading their appearance, so the whole camp respected and favored him. Seeing Chana's pitiful condition and appearance, the prince asked, "Don't you have enough clothes to wear? And what are you doing hiding in that haystack?" Chana smiled shyly. "I have a house left by my parents. It's old and dilapidated, but still livable. The reason I came to live here is because I'm crazy about a horse. Here it is." Chana led the prince to see the horse on the left side of the stable. The horse's figure was slender, with a red line running along its back and legs, standing out against its ivory-colored fur. It looked very noble and elegant. The prince curiously looked at its eyes, legs, and touched its belly, and suddenly exclaimed, "Truly the king of horses." Chana said happily, "Yes!" And more than the king of horses, because it can hear human voices, is docile and easy to train. Then Chana came and stroked the horse's mane, saying, "Lie down, my dear friend." The horse obediently lay down, resting its head on Chana's leg in a friendly manner. "How old is he, Chana?" "He is the same age as me," my father said. "He also said that he was born on the same day and hour as me." The prince suddenly frowned. "What day and time were you born, Chana?" "Sir, on the full moon day of Vesaka, when the sun rises to the height of several shoulder poles." Suddenly, the prince looked at Ananda. Ananda looked at the prince. Ananda said, "It's amazing. So all of us, the royal brother, me, Chana, and this horse are the same age, born on the same day, at the same hour." Very interested, the prince asked, "What's his name, Chana?" "His name is Kanthaka." From that day on, the prince and Ananda often visited Chana and the horse Kanthaka. Chana knew that the people who came to visit him were two noble princes of the Kapilavatthu kingdom, so he respected them even more. The prince and Ananda brought Chana clothes, supplies, and money. In return, Chana taught them how to take care of horses, how to ride horses, and how to tame horses. Soon, the prince became very good at horse riding and became very close to Chana. As for Chana, was very loyal, serving the prince with all her heart. Lady Gautama, through her maids, knew about this, so she reported it to the king. Thinking that there was no harm in it, and the prince was already a grown-up young man, in need of healthy pleasures, King Suddhodana then let Chana live next to the garden near the palace, and built a beautiful stable for the horse Kanthaka to please the prince. To the west of the royal city there was a castle, where King Suddhodana reserved to welcome King Supabuddha and Queen Amitabhamita, his younger sister. Accompanying the king and queen of Kolia were always Prince Devadatta, Princess Yasodhara, and many princes and sons of the royal family. Thus, the young men and women of the two countries had the opportunity to meet, talk, exchange knowledge, and have fun traveling here and there. Yasodhara, later known by other names, Badakanan, Bimbadevi, Gop, Rahulamat, had the noble, elegant, and shy beauty of a white chrysanthemum on the mountain top. It was Lady Gautama who took special notice of this beautiful princess with a gentle and quiet personality. The two got along very well. Devadatta was knowledgeable in many fields. In discussions about philosophy, literature, with his friends, Devadatta always stood out. As for the prince, he just sat and listened attentively, but in the end, he smiled silently. "Brother," Devadatta said, "I have heard of your great learning, but why don't you attend so that we can broaden our knowledge? The prince gently placed his hand on Devadatta's shoulder. You, the prince, are the best, worthy of holding the brush of honor on the debate mats. Who else would dare to compete with you? Devadatta grabbed the prince's hand and pushed it away. I dare not believe that. The emperor himself is the wisest person. He only wants to stay out of all debates to enjoy the fisherman's profit. The prince was very gentle. I wouldn't dare. But I know very well that all arguments lead nowhere. How meaningless and futile. Devadatta waved his hand and left, smiling coldly. See, your majesty is always the wise man among these small fry. The prince thought to himself. Devadatta's belligerence and aggressiveness, which contained a fierce streak, were unfavorable factors for his life later on. One day, in the spring, a flock of snow-white cranes, with vermilion heads and feet, red-crowned cranes, from the south flew across the sky of the upper garden on their way to the Himalayas. Devadatta saw them, and immediately raised his bow and aimed. The ferocious arrow tore through the wind and soared into the sky. The whole flock of birds suddenly became chaotic. A small bird staggered and fell to the ground, its feathers stained with blood from its wound. Prince Siddhārtha was sitting in the flower garden at that time, saw it, quickly ran over, gently lifted the injured bird. He sat cross-legged, hugged the bird close to his chest, meticulously straightened its feathers, and caressed the crane's heart to calm it down. The prince stretched out his hand, as smooth as a young banana bud just opening its leaves, and caressed the bird with the gentle love of a mother. With his left hand he held the bird with a reassuring gesture. With his right hand he gently pulled out the cruel arrow, then picked fresh leaves mixed with honey and applied it to the wound. From his childhood until now, the prince had never known what pain was. His soft hand accidentally touched the sharp arrowhead, causing him to feel extremely painful and uncomfortable. Therefore, the prince deeply sympathized with the bird's serious wound and wholeheartedly took care of it himself without hesitation. A moment later, Devadatta's guards ran in from outside and respectfully reported, "Your Highness, the Prince of Kolia, Devadatta, has just shot a crane that fell into this garden. Dear Prince, please give that crane to our prince." Prince Siddhārtha replied, "Impossible. You go back and tell the prince. If the crane is dead, I can give it to you, but now that it is still alive, I must keep it to take care of its wound." Devadatta angrily rode his horse forward, leaning on his hands and shouting, "The crane flying in the sky is ownerless, but once I have shot it down, whether dead or alive, it belongs to me. It is only right that you, my brother, return the crane to me." Prince Siddhārtha pressed the crane's neck against his cheek and spoke gently but sternly. "Dear brother, not only does this poor wounded crane belong to me, needing my protection and care, but all weak and defenseless creatures, I have the duty to protect and support. I wish that my love must be shared equally with all living beings. I also wish that my compassion must be a cool, gentle voice in the midst of this evil, cruel world of humans. I must find a way to make that compassion soothe and comfort all the sorrow and suffering in the world. That thought is my eternal wish. Your Majesty must understand that." Devadatta shook his head and smiled coldly. "Dear brother, no one can understand that hypocritical theory of humans and animals are equal." Prince Siddhārtha hugged the bird very affectionately and stood up. "There is no hypocrisy here when I love this poor bird. If your brother cannot understand or does not want to understand, then let us bring this matter to the clan council and ask the wise elders and superiors to judge." So the matter was brought to the court with the council of elders representing both the Kapilavatthu and Kolia kingdoms. Many arguments were brought up for discussion and dissection quite objectively. No one was biased towards the other. However, both Prince Siddhārtha and Devadatta were right. In the end, it was unclear who was right or wrong. While everyone was in a dilemma, suddenly a powerful voice came from behind. From ancient times until now, the myriad of things in the world do not go beyond life. If in this kingdom, life still has some value, then the protector of life has the right to keep the bird more than the destroyer of life. The destroyer of life is fierce, vicious, synonymous with cruelty and destruction. The protector of life is gentle, kind, synonymous with preservation and construction. One side is hatred and darkness, The other side is love and light. Both have two very clear and distinct meanings, as bright as the sun and the moon. Who is right and who is wrong no longer needs to be argued. Let's hand the poor crane over to the benevolent prince. The courtiers and the council of elders felt relieved and sighed with relief. They happily acknowledged that the judgment was wise, noble, fair, reasonable, and in accordance with the eternal way of life. King Siddhārtha was very impressed, turned to look at the intelligent and profound speaker, but strangely enough, there was no one behind him. A high-ranking official said that he saw a strange monk appear, say what he needed to say, and then disappear as if by magic. So Prince Siddhārtha won the bet, happily brought the bird home, then took care of it very attentively with all his heart. Not long after, the crane's wound was completely healed. There seemed to be an invisible connection between the man and the bird, so wherever the prince went, the crane followed him or leaned against him with all peace of mind and trust. In the fall, when the cranes migrated, escaping the cold, leaving the Himalayas to seek the warm sunshine of the south, they gathered together to leave the north. The prince brought the birds to the royal garden, caressed the cranes lovingly, looked at the birds in the sky and said, "My child! Every reunion must have a parting. After months of taking refuge with me, you have now gained enough strength to return to your friends today. You must understand my love, but I cannot let that love bind you to this cramped garden. I will return you to the vast sky, return you to your days of freedom, to your long-lost relatives." The prince threw the bird into the air. The crane blinked its eyes, circled 3 times, cried out a farewell, then flapped its wings and flew away with the flock to the far horizon. The prince stared at the bird until it disappeared. He was both happy and sad, an indescribable feeling. Lord Siddhārtha was deep in thought, his forehead furrowed into deep lines. For many years he had dreamed of having a son, a prince with an extraordinary appearance and character, with a deep foundation of learning from his previous life. He was talented but gentle and modest. He was dignified but kind and gentle. In that childish figure, with a kind heart and a bright mind, were hidden so many pure thoughts, so many noble virtues yet to be revealed. My son's love was gentle, soft, and immense like the ocean. He loved people, loved animals, loved even the smallest living beings, and loved even the fallen petals, the fallen leaves. He loved the lives of all species as he loved himself. He seemed to want to find equality between people and all things around him. His personality was quiet, silent, always as if he was immersed in a secret world of thoughts. I wonder what was going on in that small, pretty mind. Oh, that phoenix has grown its feathers, its colors are regal and noble. It is standing in the middle, many heads higher than the people and its kind. The royal children who are often close to it, such as Mahanam, Bhaddiya, Devadatta, Kimbila, Kadudai, Anuruddha, Ananda, are not without great talent and knowledge, but compared to it, they are worlds apart. In debates, even when forced to contribute their opinions, its understanding always seems profound, strange, and unusual. It doubts the wisdom of the ancients, of the Vedic and Upanishad scriptures. In the few times it was allowed to attend the royal court's conferences, people actively proposed measures to reform society, plan policies on education, develop the economy, strengthen military forces, or find the right and wise diplomatic direction. It was always as silent as a vase. When the court was dismissed, if asked, it always seemed pessimistic, saying that all the opinions of the prince's old ministers were only half-hearted measures. They only responded to the temporary situation, solving the symptoms but not the root cause. Furthermore, the royal family's own interests, the private desires and fame of the mandarins, were great obstacles, a screen, a closed door, that could hardly bring true happiness and peace to the hungry and suffering people. It demanded an end to injustice and inequality in the whole society. It wanted to take away its own interests. How illusory and vain. Could it be that the ancient prophecy of the ascetic Asita and the Brahmin Kondanya will come true? No one understands his path and his aspirations. If my son can follow my will and the will of his ancestors, and knows how to respect and preserve the ancestral temples in the country, then with his learning, talent, and outstanding intelligence, he will soon become the greatest emperor in the world. Perhaps he also understands that Kapilavatthu is a small kingdom, which for generations has been controlled and dependent on the neighboring Kosala Empire. And then there is the powerful Magadha kingdom, which always intends to invade neighboring small countries, create a strong position to compete and claim hegemony with Kosala. Now that I am old, my strength is exhausted, my intelligence has worn out. How can I hope to protect my beautiful country, let alone develop, become rich, and become powerful? Oh, will he give up everything to become a monk? And what will become of this kingdom? Will the blood and bones of his ancestors, the descendants of the sun god, be wasted for generations? And will even the small but legitimate joy of having grandchildren to cherish and hold with affection be taken away? The more I thought about it, the more sad I became. I had to find a way to stop the danger from the four messengers and not let my son meet them. I had to lock that phoenix in a splendid palace with the 5 pleasures of heaven. Maybe then I could shackle its legs and tie its wings. Then the order was given. A group of trusted officials and soldiers once again secretly went to search for old, sick, dead envoys, to be sent to a faraway place with allowances for accommodation, food, and medicine. These were old people with unsightly bony bodies, wrinkled, huddled, trembling people with walking sticks, with backs bent like a swing. These were the crippled, blind, lame, broken, leprosy, hideous sores that were sometimes overlooked before. And even the slovenly beggars were invited out of the capital. The king also encouraged every household to plant trees, every household to grow ornamental flowers, and every household to live politely, culturedly, civilized. Every residential area of 10,000 people must have a public flower garden, an open-air theater, and a house to organize festivals, music, and dance, so that everyone has a place to entertain, have fun. As for the monks and ascetics with dignified appearances and otherworldly manners, the king did not have to worry, because searching all over Kapilavatthu, they were all ugly, with disheveled hair and beards, dirty clothes, just a little better than beggars. Along with decorating and embellishing the capital to make it green, clean, and beautiful, the king invited talented architects from all over the country, great painters, experienced and skilled craftsmen, to build 3 modern, luxurious, and most convenient palaces in Jambudvipa. These are the Rama Palace, 9 stories high, for the winter, the Suba Palace, 7 stories high, for the rainy season, the Sarama Palace, 5 stories high, for the summer. The special thing about these 3 palaces is that although their layout, structure, and shape are different, their length, width, and height must be equal. In winter, the rooms all have fireplaces burning with fragrant wood. The frescoes on the walls and ceilings are warm flames or are coordinated with warm, bright colors. The costumes and jewelry of musicians, singers, dancers are all pink, red, orange, bright yellow. Food and drinks must not only be delicious and nutritious, but also beautiful and pleasing to the eye. Special attention should be paid to spicy, hot, warm spices to ward off the cold. In the summer, everywhere is cool, fresh, and attractive. The interior is specially designed. The windows have curtains and nets made of soft gold and silver threads that function to ventilate and block strong winds. The walls are painted with trees, flowers, and leaves in tones of clear green, sky blue, light jade green, and sea blue, looking like spring and fresh, pure nature. The costumes and makeup of the singers, dancers, musicians, and servants must also have green as the main color. On hot days of the year, the surrounding eaves are designed very strangely. Water from the lake is pumped up, dripping down, spraying cool mist. When necessary, it can create small rains, making a pattering sound or playing magical music and melodies. Next to the large windows, pots of gold, silver, and crystal are filled with water mixed with mud and fragrant powder to grow 5 types of lotus, which always bloom in 5 colors. Birds of all kinds, with many voices and colors, chirp happily and playfully. Incense pots were hidden in the wings and bellies of artificial phoenixes, peacocks, lions, dragons, giving off a wonderful fragrance. On windy days, hundreds of wind instruments rang out, playing in harmony with clear sounds like fairy music. In the garden, 4 lakes on all sides were clear emerald green, with lotus flowers of 5 colors. Big and small fish of all colors swam peacefully and serenely. Then there were bridges, pavilions, rare bonsai trees, artificial mountains, lawns, stone lanterns, fine art statues, arranged harmoniously, elaborately, and beautifully. Everywhere you looked was beautiful. Everywhere you looked, it looked like a garden in heaven. Food and drink were always prepared, brought from faraway places. Delicacies had to be guaranteed to be fresh, nutritious, cool, and laxative. Fruits and vegetables had to be sterilized, washed with pure water. The characteristic of the rainy season palace is to create a feeling of cleanliness and dryness, so it has all the characteristics of both winter and summer palaces. After establishing the three palaces, the king selected singers, dancers, musicians, and maids to serve and take care of the prince. Then, day and night, this place was an endless spring, an endless paradise. The king also allowed the children of the royal family, such as Mahanama, Devadatta, Ananda, Anuruddha, to come and play and participate in discussions about literature, philosophy, politics. Regarding folk activities, in general, about life outside the palace, these princes and kings were very naive, but when it came to knowledge of scriptures, verses, they were very learned. They might not know where a grain of rice comes from, but they knew very well how many incarnations of the god of preservation Vishnu and the god of destruction Shiva. They may not understand why people suffer from leprosy, cholera, plague, but they are very knowledgeable about the complex rituals and ceremonies of traditional Brahmanical sects. And when discussions come to the metaphysical realm, to God, to human destiny, to life and death, they just cite scriptures. Some are skeptical about the supreme entity that governs the universe. Some want to completely strip away all the rights of the Brahmin priestly class that has been exploiting the common people for generations in sacrificial ceremonies, weddings, funerals, etc. The most exciting thing is when talking about human morality. Only when there are good people to manage and run society can all people be happy and prosperous. It seems that the prince is happiest when he sees the princes and kings thinking of others, of the classes of people that they will lead in the future. At times like these, the prince ordered his maids to pour more tea, get more cakes, and light some more incense burners that had burned out. All fun must come to an end. When the servants and maids had all fallen asleep, the prince would sit on the porch, silently watching the moon and stars, staring into infinity. There seemed to be countless secrets. There seemed to be questions hidden in the void that the prince had no way to answer. Then, the sound of the flute replaced his feelings, and the prince would again immerse himself in the vast and melancholy world of sound. The king secretly sent people to follow and learn what was happening in the three palaces of joy. It turned out that the prince did not pay attention to the beautiful, graceful, and charming women around him. Big banquets, small banquets, this group of singers, that group of dancers, only created surprise and excitement for the prince at first. After that, the prince gradually let them rest. The prince only regularly held light tea parties, inviting more young men from the Sakya family to attend the conference. King Suddhodana felt worried. The other day, during the court session, he discussed this with his ministers. "My lords, the prince is truly a rare flower among the people. If the prince is willing to accept and rule the kingdom, then in the future, no powerful country will have to make us afraid. But those three splendid palaces with singers, beautiful women, with rare delicacies and drinks in the world, still did not bring the results I expected." The whale still seemed to refuse to take the bait. The phoenix was still quietly walking outside the cage. I am truly worried about the prophecy of the ascetic Asita and the Brahmin Kondanya. So, my lords, do you have any good plans or suggestions to share with me? An old minister said, "Your Majesty, no hero has ever passed the beauty pass. The crown prince is 16 years old this year, a handsome young man with a strong spirit. Why doesn't your Majesty use a strand of a beauty's hair to tie the crown prince's legs? That is the best plan." King Suddhodana sighed. "In the three palaces of joy, there are so many beautiful women in their prime, but the crown prince doesn't even bother to look at them. Your strand of hair seems useless." "Sir, that is a beauty selected by the royal palace. There must be a selection of beauties presided over by the crown prince himself. That would be the best plan. It must be a peerless beauty with pure and elegant beauty that can keep the crown prince in that splendid golden palace. Each person's heart has its own language, your Majesty. King Suddhodana heard that it made sense, stroked his beard, and smiled, satisfied. Then, a public proclamation was widely circulated throughout the country, with special priority given to the rich, nobles, children of high-ranking officials, and mandarins in the royal court. With loudspeakers, drums, galloping horses, messages were handed to the streets and towns. In no time, the whole country was abuzz with talk about the prince's choice of beauties. Everyone would be rewarded, but the most beautiful person in the world, who caught the prince's eye, would be given the most precious reward in Kapilavatthu. What was the most precious reward in the country? All the girls in the world implicitly understood that it was to be the bag tender for the man who was known as the most handsome and extraordinary in Kapilavatthu. The girls, though beautiful, but of low status, did not dare to dream of it, but the princesses of noble families had their hearts moved and fluttered. Their cheeks suddenly turned rosy like the color of rouge. Their eyes were shy and timid, hiding behind silk curtains with the most poetic dreams, dreamy, absent-minded looks into the distant palaces and attics. The day of the contest had come. The capital city of Kapilavatthu seemed to be lit up, even more brilliant with hundreds of graceful beauties, gracefully descending from 2-horse and 4-horse chariots. The flowers were royal and noble, the girls were in their prime, their cheeks were fair, their makeup was gorgeous, their jade-like feet were gracefully entering the palace. The girls from prestigious and wealthy families were just starting to smile, shy and tender, following the call of their hearts and coming. The excellent son of Kapilavatthu sat as the chairman and judge for this beauty contest, according to the arrangement of the king and queen, and he did not dare to let them be upset. The beauties slowly and gently passed by, one by one. The lotus feet hesitated, fluttered. The precious Kasi silk scarves, fragrant, with all kinds of brilliant colors like spring flowers, like rippling, graceful waves. Everything passed by, passed by. The handsome young man with blue eyes as clear as the calm surface of an autumn lake. He looked at each beautiful woman, bowed his head slightly, smiled slightly, with a gentle and polite manner, then solemnly presented precious rewards to each of them. The music played softly, the fragrance of thousands of flowers spread. Waves of beautiful women passed by one. Their big, round, black eyes glanced at the prince with vague fear. They felt so small and insignificant. There was something solemn, majestic, and luxurious about that handsome man. Before coming here, they had built up in their minds so many beautiful dreams. But when waiting for their turn, many complicated feelings mixed together, half wanting to step forward, half wanting to retreat. And clearly it is difficult for any beautiful figure to open the door to enter the heart of a king. The King Suddhodana, Queen Gautami, the princes, the old ministers, sat behind the discreet curtains, watching with their eyes. The golden and silver trays filled with jewels and ivory gradually decreased, but it seemed that the prince's heart had not yet been moved. Those calm, clear blue eyes had never once stopped, seemingly attentive, seemingly surprised at any beauty. When the last pearl had just followed the last beauty away, behind the curtains, a sigh had not yet ended when the palace suddenly seemed to light up. The voices of admiration all around, without prior arrangement, exclaimed, praised, and exclaimed. The prince was silent, hearing his heart beat gently, looking at the beauty who had just arrived. She was so beautiful, truly the beauty of beauties. It seemed that all the charm, elegance, nobility, elegance, gentleness, and purity of the world's beauties had woven into her, a masterpiece of nature's beauty. Coming before the prince, she gently bowed her head, smiled confidently, her teeth like sprouting pomegranate seeds, shining like polished jade, and spoke in a voice as elegant as the call of the Kalavinka bird. "Oh, handsome prince! I wonder if the prince has anything else to give me?" "Yes, yes!" the prince replied, then smiled and slowly said, "But all those jewels are not worthy of a peerless beauty. I still have a precious treasure to protect my body." After saying that, the prince reached inside his collar, took out the most precious pearl necklace that he rarely revealed, and solemnly put it on the beauty in front of hundreds of admiring eyes. The beauty smiled, softly thanked. Her words were as clear as a nightingale's whisper, like crystal beads ringing. The prince felt light and elated. Something very strange, very magical for the first time crept into his soul, very gentle and very warm. The next day, the results of the beauty selection, like good news, spread throughout the kingdom. Suddhodana felt elated and extremely happy, smiling as he said to Lady Gautami, "Queen, we have locked that phoenix in a cage." Dear ladies and gentlemen, you have just listened to the video about the life of Buddha Shakyamuni, adapted from the work A Life, a Sun and Moon by Master Gioi Duc. This video series will be broadcast at 7 p.m. every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on the YouTube channel Buddhist Story. We sincerely thank you for watching. To not miss the next episodes, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. If you find the content useful, please share this video with your relatives and friends. All your comments are very valuable to us. Please leave comments below the video so we can discuss and share together. Thank you, and see you again in the next episodes of the video series, The Life of Buddha Shakyamuni.